Welcome to another episode of Healing Her Halo. I'm your host, Patience Murray, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Priscilla María Gutiérrez. She's a certified trauma recovery coach and keynote speaker who heals from trauma out loud for those struggling in silence. As CEO and founder of Cycle Breakers Club, she empowers others to become cycle breakers through private coaching. Some cycles her clients are currently breaking through. Okay, I'm going to start that from the top because I definitely want to get this nice and
Yeah,
clean.
no worries.
But okay. 5, 4, 3. It's a good thing we pre-recorded. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of Healing Her Halo. I'm your host, Patience Murray, and today I'm joined by a truly special guest, Priscilla María Gutiérrez. She's a certified trauma recovery coach and keynote speaker who heals from trauma out loud for those struggling in silence. As CEO and founder of Cycle Breakers Club, she empowers others to become cycle breakers through private coaching. Some cycles her clients are courageously breaking through are unhealthy habits, people pleasing, self doubt, and toxic relationships. She has partnered with organizations such as a popular alcohol reduction app and a scholarship program that serves first generation Latinx college students through the DC office of the State Superintendent of Education. Priscilla Maria obtained her bachelor's degree from Johns Hopkins University and a Juris Doctor from UC Irvine School of Law. She has shared her insights and expertise on colleges and stages nationwide as a keynote speaker and has been featured on Cheddar News, The Mighty, and the We're All Insane podcast. Priscilla, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much, Patience, for having me. It is an honor to share space with you, and I'm really excited for this conversation.
I love share
Yeah.
space. I love that terminology of share space. So what brought you to trauma recovery work?
So I like to say that it chose me because, as you
Mm.
mentioned in my bio, I did not study anything remotely close to life coaching or public speaking, at least directly. And so how it really came about was me being very curious and open minded. So after I finished my Juris Doctor, I made the courageous decision to say, I don't want to practice law. And after that decision, it was a matter of, well, you did all that. Now what? Now what do you want to do? And you made this decision. Now you have to stand on it and really figure it out. And so, long story short, I came across a profile on social media, Blooming with Emmy, and she is a certified trauma recovery coach. And I had never heard of that before. I have a lot of experience going to therapists, rehabs, wilderness programs, support groups, and I had never really at all tapped into life coaching, let alone heard of trauma recovery coaches, which are essentially life coaches and peer support. So,
Honestly, this is new to me too.
yeah,
When I saw trauma recovery coach, I didn't really know necessarily like what that work entails exactly and how it's different from a therapist versus psychiatrist versus it's so many different things out there. So like what denotes a trauma recovery
that's,
coach?
that's a great question. I certainly didn't know until I actually immersed myself in the certification program, but it is a life coach that is trauma informed. And so they're certainly not a clinician or anything of the sort. We're not mental health professionals, so to say, at least traditionally. But what we do is we do everything that a life coach does, which is hold space and set goals, challenge our clients to overcome self-limiting beliefs, asking a lot of thought-provoking questions, and so essentially being a collaborator on someone's life mission, life goals. And then the trauma recovery portion is we are able to help our clients with nervous system regulation, giving them tools, giving them resources, and being gentle with them. So, as a trauma survivor, I can see often in other people how trauma is affecting them. And because I've walked this path for many years as someone getting help, I am able to guide and just be an anchor for someone that may have no idea. And often people that I work with really don't have direction or an understanding of what are my options, what are my mental health options. They may have grown up hearing a lot of negative comments, and so they may not even trust their voice or trust their decision making and their judgment. And so,
You are spot
yeah.
on. You are so spot on. And I do want to lean into the fact that you did say that you are a trauma survivor. So thank you for just trusting me, trusting this platform with your story, with your just energy, your insights, your wealth of knowledge that you have, and your compassion, right, for others. And I do feel like sometimes as trauma survivors, we have this more innate sense of how to be more kind and more compassionate to other people who are dealing with different experiences. Maybe it's trauma, maybe it's maybe something that somebody else wouldn't consider trauma, but for them, it triggers them in that way.
Mhm.
So, so how did you come to this place of how did you come to this place of wanting to be more so a leader or facilitator in or collaborator, as you said, in someone
Mhm.
else's life journey?
It really started with a willingness to be more authentic. And so on paper, I went to top schools. I did well academically. I volunteered. By all measures or most measures, I was a good kid. And so I've lived a lot of my life on autopilot, I would say. And so once I finished grad school, there was like this huge weight lifted off of me where it was like, I've done what I knew I was always going to do, which is, get my degrees. Now what? And so it really took a lot of self belief, which in the moment I didn't necessarily have. I just took a leap of faith and I said, you know what? I don't know exactly what I want to do or what I want to become professionally, but I know that it's not an attorney. I know it's not corporate America. And I know at this point that it's so important for me to feel like I am myself and authentic. And so throughout, probably since like middle school, like seventh grade, I started to be really interested in like civil rights. And so that passion followed me through high school, college, and law school. And so that was my whole focus with law. It was, oh, I'm going to be the people's champion and, help people. And a lot of attorneys do that. But I realized for me, this is not the route. This is not the way that I can really connect with people that I want to connect with. And so I really leaned into the passions that I've had since a little kid, which was social justice and community impact. And so to get to the point of being so open with my lived experiences, that is very ironic and surprising and drastically different than how I spent the majority of my life, which was very quiet. Uh, I don't think people, I no, literally, people would ask me if I ever talk. Um,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
it was a little rude, but and
Just a little, just a smidge of rudeness in
yeah,
there. Well intentioned.
yeah, and very, very protective of myself. So throughout college and law school, I was so guarded. And so
Yeah.
it really just took kind of just, it's interesting because I'm thinking of Dennis Rodman and I'll
Oh,
explain. But Dennis Rodman, logically, of course, Dennis
well, do
Rodman.
share.
But I read an interview and he said that at some point in his youth or young adulthood, he wanted to unalive himself. And he ultimately decided not to, but he said, well, if I'm going to unalive myself and I was so ready to do that, then I might as well just live life to the fullest and like do whatever I want. And so, he dressed how he wanted, he did whatever he wanted. So I kind of adopted that where I was like, because I have been, to be frank, I've been at different points of my life that I felt very overwhelmed in very dark spaces. And then I was like, you know what, if that's where I'm headed, then I might as well just go like all out and just own it and really challenge some of my fears and intrusive thoughts. And so it was gradual. I started writing first before speaking, and I would just write op eds and really vulnerable essays. And then I just started sharing more online. And then I started really getting into public speaking. And so it really has been a gradual journey. And at the core of it, it was betting on myself and standing in my authenticity.
Well, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And I was just listening to something earlier today about how, courageousness is not about the absence of fear, but, going with it and going despite the fear, because there are points in our journey I feel like we're never going to be fully unafraid of anything. It's always going to be that little healthy dose of fear that pushes us forward to excellence, right? Into our better self. So I'm super proud of you. Wow, what a change. Like what a huge, drastic, bold change move to make from law school to moving more into social justice. So, when you made that transition, how do you feel like your own traumas, right,
Mhm.
affected how you showed up with others? Like, how do you feel like that either helped you, or do you feel like you had to do more work when you
Mhm.
made the switch?
It's a great question. So when I made the switch, I actually think my traumas, I'm writing a book, and one of the parts of the book is called Turning Traumas into Commas. And that whole,
Well, you better go ahead. We're going to need a copy of this book. We need you to come back to tell us how to turn the traumas into commas,
I
please.
would love, yeah. And part of that is, I grew up most of my life feeling a lot of shame, feeling like damaged goods, broken, all of that. And now I'm like, because I was like, I'm going to start to see the world differently. I'm a mindset coach. And so my whole focus is challenging the way that we see the world and see ourselves and see others. And this view has not served me. When I stand in shame and doubt, I feel stuck, I feel low. So let me try something different. And so I see now my lived experience as a huge asset. I'm not thankful for my traumas. I don't credit them for anything, but I credit myself and can recognize that I am more resilient after what I've been through. And so,
And definitely more relatable. I feel like there's this huge layer of relatability that gets added to us when we do go through and endure, and make it through to the other side. So
yeah,
we're right where we need to be.
absolutely. And the fact that I'm on this podcast is very affirming of that because, we haven't met, in real life or anything. This is our first time talking, but I
Yeah.
feel very comfortable with you. I feel like if we were to sit down and share our stories, there would be a lot of parallels. And so that has definitely been a gift is compassion and connection. Just being
Yeah.
able to relate to people from so many different walks of life in my life coaching business because of what I've been through or have
Mhm.
direct experience with.
So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, I completely understand. But I do like to know, like, what have you gone through? Because there's a part of me that always loves to, I'm a champion, like I'm focused on who I'm, destined to be. My vision is that, not so much what I went through, but just
Mhm.
focused on the future self and becoming that person. But I do think it's also very helpful sometimes when people do hear, like, okay, this is what I went through. And now this is me. And
Mhm.
despite or because of what I went through, this is who I am,
Mhm.
you know. And for me, I can share really
Yeah.
quick. I'm a Pulse nightclub shooting survivor. And
Mm.
I was shot twice. I was held hostage for 3 hours in that shooting. A lot of the fears and just the way that I held myself back from just being out in the world and going after my dreams had a lot to do with that fear of something like that ever happening again.
Mhm.
Like literally not wanting to be in physical places around people,
Mhm.
um, thinking that my decision making some way and just that sort of loss of your voice, loss
Mhm.
of trust in your voice. And that was something that you said earlier that I wanted to get back to. And I feel like I'm kind of getting back there a little bit, but
Mhm.
like that whole experience of trauma really did make me lose trust in my decision making and my voice. And it took me a really, really long time to get to this place where I feel like, you know what? God's got me covered,
Yes.
you know?
Mhm.
So in your own way of how you would want to share
Yeah.
it, like what is your story?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. I didn't know that. I read what you sent me, but I didn't know more details that you just shared. And
Mhm.
I'm so thankful that you are here with us. I'm so thankful that you've chosen to turn pain into purpose and to use your voice. You found it, you reclaimed it, you got the power back, and you're choosing to help other survivors, and that says a lot about your character. So really
Thank you.
thankful for you sharing. As far as myself, I'm very comfortable sharing. So as far as my traumas, I have quite a few, and I that was a nervous laugh, by the way, but I
No, I understand. I nervous laugh all the time.
please, I categorize them. So I would say the most influential ones have been the sexual trauma and then my brother's brain injury. And so, in regards to the sexual trauma, it's interesting. The more time I have spent reflecting, the more experiences I have realized were not okay. Uh, but the top two experiences that have really affected me were the molestation by my grandfather and then the rape by a partner. And so the childhood molestation absolutely did a number on me. And I didn't really process and accept that I had been molested by him until I was about 19. And this happened 8 and 10 that I remember. And so trauma is very complex. It's very nuanced. It's not like anything else. So some people, unfortunately, I see on social media, I hear in conversations a lot of ignorance around sexual trauma where it's like, well, why did you wait so long? Or that happened like 10 years ago, move on and things like that. That's not how the body works. The body absolutely holds on to trauma. So even if you don't talk about it or think about it, it's in your body. Your body remembers through sensations, through feelings. So, like you were describing how some, crowded areas, your body was telling you this is not safe. And so for me, my body was telling me all types of things throughout my adolescence that I didn't understand. So, for example, I can recall I was on a family trip and I was just observing this, what I presume to be a grandfather and a little girl. And I just did not like him. That man didn't do anything to me. From what I saw, he didn't do anything overtly inappropriate with the little girl. But I was just like mean eyeing him, like, I'm waiting for you to do something. And when we got off the ferry and we're getting into a taxi, he offered his hand to help me up. And I literally was like, no. Like, I was disgusted. I was angry at him. He didn't do anything to me. That was when I was 15. And I can look back on different situations and be like, you were having a trauma response. You were triggered. I didn't know what triggered was. And throughout college, I definitely reenacted trauma. And so that looked like very impulsive behaviors around men. That looked like recreating conflict with men, because I have other trauma with someone else involving domestic violence. So my relationship with men throughout my life hasn't been the healthiest. I have a great father that has always been a provider, um, but it doesn't matter. When it comes to PTSD, your brain will generalize. And even if the evidence isn't there, it will tell you don't trust all men, don't trust, um, all crowded areas, things like that. And so I definitely, I'll tell you more about what that looked like. So that looked like me getting into fights with men. That looked like me just being very angry at men. It didn't take much for me to feel unsafe with a man. And it's not to say that there wasn't a premise for that. I certainly wasn't just bored and just getting mad, but my reaction was very heightened by my trauma and or alcohol at the time. And so I put myself in a lot of dangerous situations that looked like semi getting kidnapped. I really don't know how to categorize the situation. I agreed to, long story short, I agreed to enter a vehicle with my friends and these individuals that they met. And they said they were going to take us to one location, from DC to Baltimore. And they were going in the opposite direction. And then they took my friend's phone, they locked the doors. The one driving was like, I'm doing all this for you. What are you going to do for me? So he was definitely insinuating like we're about to do something to both of y'all. They do not like me, so I didn't feel like I was directly their target, but they certainly were coming after my friends. And
I'm so sorry you had to go through that, any of that. And let me just take a second to say that thank you for sharing your story. And I know that it's the complexities of it and the nuances of it. It's so many layers to it. And the way that you're walking us through it, I do appreciate you just taking your time. And I know some of these things aren't always the easiest to revisit or to just even, kind of bring up even in the synopsis kind of way. So I do appreciate you for the sacrifice that you're, putting your body through right now, because I'm not sure how further along like you are, but I know just for me listening to you, my heart is just like crying out. I want to hug you, and I just want to give you a big hug. Air
what I
hug.
saw, of course, yeah, I'm a hugger. So, and my vulnerability is a reflection of the safety that you've provided for me to just be myself. So thank you for that. And and yeah, and so fortunately we got out of that situation because I pretended to be nauseous and I would turn into an actress. It was very odd. But anyways, I basically
And you have an element of humor to you that I can really relate to, because even like in the really dark moments, you can like find like some like, girl, I did what I had to do. We got out of there.
sure did.
Out.
Yeah. I basically put on a show and the guy was like, "Oh no, I don't want her to throw up all over the place." And so he finally pulled over, but he pulled off, from the highway into a very wooded area, like super creepy. And then I basically told my friends, like, get your phone and like, let's follow me. And then I just went out and we ran. We just ran. We ran into people's backyards and we just kept running until we felt like we were far enough from them. But they definitely,
You're a hero. You are absolutely a
thank you.
hero.
No one has
No, you really are. No, you took initiative in a moment
appreciate.
that helped you and your friend get to safety,
Mhm.
and that makes you a hero. And I feel like that situation could have gone completely left. It could have, you guys could also not have be here right now.
Mhm.
So I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, no one has ever said that to me, including the people that were there. And so,
Wow.
and I don't expect that from anyone, but it's
Mhm.
just really nice to hear you say that. So thank you for seeing me. And prior to that, um, one of the individuals tried to get me to follow him into a secluded dark alley. And so that just further, illustrates
Mhm.
they they lived a certain lifestyle that, pretty much let me know they weren't about following the rules. And so I'm just grateful that we got out of that situation. And there's like different situations like that where just close calls, um, sometimes my anger getting the best of me. I own that I have been very aggressive and or violent, and things like that. And so it didn't end, unfortunately, in college. In law school, that's when I experienced the rape from someone that I was in love with. So I mentioned earlier that I have experienced different events that are categorized as sexual assault, but the top two, honestly, that I really ever think of are my grandfather and this rape because I loved them. I really, really loved my grandfather and I really, really loved my boyfriend at the time. And so that was what made it so much worse because the other ones, yeah, they were upsetting and yeah, they were,
Like you didn't expect action from these
yeah,
people,
it's like
you
I
know.
could rationalize it, so to say, by saying, okay, well, there's some really unhinged people in the world. There's evil in the world. That's where these people may or may not fall into. but my blood, like my own blood, my own, after my father, I loved him, as far as men in my life. And then with my boyfriend, that was my first love. And so it was so confusing. And so for any trauma survivors that can relate to that, because I know the media likes to portray that sexual predators are often boogie men or someone in an alley or some really creepy old man, but that's not the truth. Sexual predators can be any gender identity, any age, any walk of life. And the biggest thing I want to emphasize is that the vast majority of cases where someone is sexually assaulted, they are assaulted by someone they know. So someone very close to them. And that is what adds an additional layer of confusion, because it's like, wait, but I love them and they love me. And they've done so many nice things for me. And, there's just, it's not the boogeyman, it's your grandfather, it's the man
Yeah.
you love. And so that was extremely
And
painful. Mhm.
and I'm sure, and I'm absolutely sure that like life after that and rebuilding yourself, rebuilding your perspective, right? And looking for the right perspective in situations, especially like the experience, like you said, when you were 15 and you saw your grandfather with their granddaughter, but it felt like you were tense, like in that moment, and that was a uncontrollable body response that you were having, to your own traumatic past, experiences. But as you got older and as you had to navigate through life and just go through and become a grown woman and possibly fall in love again, like how did you do that?
Yeah. So I haven't fallen in love again since that
Oh,
relationship, but I am very much open to it, and I believe
we're manifesting it. We're
I
manifesting it right now.
am.
The perfect man is out there for you,
Yes.
and he's walking his way towards you right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. But I did make the decision after I left that relationship, because that was part of my story as well. We dated in law school, and I actually moved from California to Michigan very, very abruptly after I broke up with him. That was a lot going on, and it was such a confusing, dark, numbing time in my life. And I'll expand more about it in my book and, in future interviews with you. But I know directly how trauma can consume you, how trauma can push you to the edge, how trauma can just drain you emotionally, physically, and mentally. And I was at that point in that relationship. And one thing I want to highlight is that, like, I love the way that you are so trauma informed and so comforting and gracious. Unfortunately, not everyone is like that, including therapists, including psychiatrists, and I've experienced that firsthand. So, one of the reasons why it was so difficult to even understand and accept that I was raped was because of the two therapists that I had seen during that time period. And I basically strive to be everything they're not when I see my clients, because I was told things like, well, you were torturing him. Why were you next to him in bed naked? And yes, I've been told a lot of things in therapy sessions that, I didn't tell anyone, because who am I going to tell? If I tell, so there's like twofold. I grew up very much, loyalty, protecting the people you love. And so that looked like setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm. And so I didn't want to go to my parents and be like, this individual just raped me, and, anything like that. And even when I talked to the therapist, like, I desperately wanted there to be another explanation. Oh no, it wasn't rape. Oh, he got confused, or it was, I don't know, miscommunication, or I don't know, he had an aneurysm. I don't know what the hell was going on with him, but the reality was he raped me. Period. And that took me a long time to accept, because it's so painful. Like, what? Like, not not the one that I, not the man that I'm planning literally to marry, have kids with, build a life with. I'm living with him. And that was the truth. You don't accidentally rape someone. That's not a thing. And so, shame on those therapists that were not helpful with validating my experience. No. And I felt like it was my fault, honestly. I felt like it was my fault because, like one of them said, that's the time that you need to have black and white boundaries. That's the time where it should be super clear. So it was like, it was my fault for engaging in like foreplay with my partner that I've been with for a long time and we're monogamous. Like this, I trusted him so much. And so
It's
that's,
mind blowing to me.
yeah.
These are the perspectives that like people are receiving right now, like to this
Mhm,
day, probably receiving certain perspectives like this from people that they are going to as trusted advisors.
mhm,
And a part of the reason why I wanted to create this platform is because I realized that there are a lot of wounded healers,
mhm,
a lot of wounded healers, a lot of wounded leaders, right?
mhm,
That are out here projecting, a lot of things onto other people because they're still in process.
mhm,
And I do, and we're always in journey, we're always in journey, but I do feel like there has to be a certain element of self-awareness when it comes to our wounds.
mhm,
It really does because that just bleeds onto other people, and maybe 10 years from now you look back and say, wow, maybe I shouldn't have said that to her,
mhm,
in that way. But her perspective on life is totally different. Maybe now, like, God forbid, like if you weren't strong enough to
mhm.
handle that feedback,
Yeah.
you could have taken your own life, like anything.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting because when you're in a therapist's office, there really is, just in my opinion, no checks and balances. It's just you and them. Like, I can't, I mean, some people can, but realistically, how feasible is it to, okay, I'm not sure how this exchange was. Let me go tell my friend. So I was talking to my therapist about, the time I got molested by my grandfather or the time I got raped. Like, those aren't easy conversations to have. And so there really is no checks and balances. It's like, at least for me, I really put them on a pedestal. I saw them just like they're the experts. They're the ones who have the degree. They're the doctor in front of their name. Like, just also my cultural upbringing of you respect your elders, you respect authority figures. And, I think of like the wilderness program, for example. I was thinking about it earlier today, where that's something I'm planning to process with my therapist the next time we speak, because I'm realizing that it's not something that I feel like I'm going to have like these deep revelations, but it's something I haven't held space for and really just talked about. Because when you're in a wilderness program, it is intense. And I'll explain for those who may not be familiar, it is an intervention program for at risk youth and young adults. And so for the under 18 group, your parents will hire private security through the program to literally kidnap you in the middle of the night and force you to go to the program, which is typically in a desert or a forest. And a lot of them are in Utah, like that area. And so, yeah. Hmm. And I was 19 at the time, barely turned 19. And so I thankfully didn't qualify for the for the midnight kidnapping, but I did voluntarily go because my brother, who is also in recovery, he was spiraling in his addiction and he had been kicked out of 7 rehabs at that point. And so the rehab director said, you should try a wilderness program, completely different, where you're isolated and you just have to sit with yourself. And so because he was in it, that's how my parents found out. And then they suggested it to me, like, you know what, maybe you should go because you seem kind of detached. And they knew I was drinking, they knew I was going out. And so, long story short, I eventually was like, you know what, I'll give it a try. And so, once you go there, it's the intake process is, I've never been incarcerated, so I don't want to speak for people that have been incarcerated, but from what I've seen and heard, it's a bit similar to when you get taken into custody or behind bars. And so, you have to undress, squat, cough. They got to make sure you have no contraband, which in the desert, contraband is really anything, contacts, piercings, razors, for hygiene. You have none of it's very intense. Yeah. And it's so, the thing about trauma is sometimes when it's just like your own echo chamber, you just kind of accept it. Like I really just accepted it, like, oh, this is what it is. And then now I'm not in the program and then I just move on with my life. But now, you know, what is it, 13 years, 14 years later, I'm able to be like, wait a minute, that's not normal. That is not normal
Yeah.
to have people.
And let's talk about that, recognizing the not normal and recognizing when you need to advocate for yourself and moving forward, most importantly, when you're in your recovery journey,
Mhm.
how to, and in a previous interview I had with another guest on the show, we were talking about the importance of really exploring within yourself what you need and saying yes please, more please of the things that you need, and no to the things that you don't want or need.
Mhm.
Because especially in experiences like that, especially with complex trauma survivors, you have a plethora of different experiences that you can choose from in a single day, that the leaps and the hoops that you have to hop over just to be fully functional like a regular human being,
Mhm.
you know. So what are some of the what are some of the strategies and the tools that you had to use for yourself to basically, I wouldn't say move on, but just like
Mhm.
power forward through all of that?
Yeah. That's very true. It is an unfair burden that us trauma survivors do have to carry, that there are obstacles. And so at different points in my life, I had different strategies and anchors. And so for a lot of it, it was therapy. And I really like my therapist now. She is Latina. She is my first Latina therapist. And I was like, whoa, I should have been had a Latina therapist because the other therapists were from a different demographic and just culturally they didn't understand me. And so that has been a game changer. And apart from therapy, I actually want to shout out medication. Um, that is a personal choice. That's for you and whoever's listening and their physician. But for me, I have found that it has really helped me. And so started medication like in oh, actually, yeah, law school. Yeah. So I was very scared to try medication. I didn't want to catch an addiction, so to say, or
And
develop.
there's so many, so like the stigmatism, around needing help, is definitely still very prevalent today. So very people are very judgmental when it comes to those sorts of things. But
Yes.
whatever you need for you, and it might not be forever. It might just be for a certain season. It might be for a certain period of time. But whatever it is, if it's helping you, see yourself better, see life in the way that'll help you create a different story for your life.
Yeah.
That's so important. But I hear you say representation. Number one, having a therapist that is representing in some way or mirroring some way you to see yourself in a more, I don't know, is that
Yeah.
basically a piece of that? Okay.
Mhm.
And then the medication and
Mhm. Yeah, and one thing I want to highlight with that is there absolutely is a lot of stigma around medication, seeing a therapist. I find, especially in communities of color. And one thing I want to say to anyone listening is that mental health conditions and physical health conditions are equally important. And so, the same way that if I see someone living with diabetes and they're taking their insulin, I'm never going to be like, why are you taking that? Or why are you seeing an endocrinologist? Like, what's wrong with you? I would never say that. And I have never heard anyone say that. But for psychological injuries and wounds, and someone wants to lean into a certain medication or see a therapist, it's like, oh, she's crazy. Or what's wrong with you? Like, go to church and whatever. And it's like, no, you, there are so many studies that support the strong link between mind and body. And so there's a lot of cancers, different ailments that can be linked to the stress caused by trauma. So this is not something to play with. This is not something you can't ignore. Your body will not ignore it. And so for anyone who is feeling unsupported, just know that there are people like myself, like patients and other trauma informed people that got your back and will support you and cheer you on. And so, apart from medication and representation, I would say certain types of therapy models. So, I have also been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, as well as OCD, eating disorders, etc. And so different therapeutic modalities have been helpful for each. So with BPD, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, has been really helpful. And so that's like a whole,
What's that?
yeah, it's like a whole curriculum. I had never experienced anything like that. But if you look at DBT, they have a lot of free resources, but it's typically around 6 months to a year where you can do it individually or in a group setting. I did it in a group setting. And you go through all these different modules. So, like distress tolerance, how to cope with stress. I believe interpersonal effectiveness. So, how to interact with people and express your needs and things like that. And mindfulness, how to be present. And so, I honestly think it's beneficial for everyone, even if you don't
So,
have DBT. Yeah.
so has this particular method of therapy been like the most effective for you in your own journey, would you say, or did it take a combination of these different
Yeah.
methods to create that customized healing path for you?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely very helpful. And I constantly share with my clients, hey, check out these DBT skills. And I still use them today. But honestly, the most influential tool was community, was absolutely having community, like people that get it. Because for a long time, it was very much an isolated experience where I kept a lot of things in and I didn't feel like anyone could really get it. I really didn't even have the self awareness fully either to even know what I was experiencing or what I was doing.
So much in my heart. I really do. You hit it right on the nose. I don't even realize how much, like in my own personal experience of, because when our situation happened in Orlando, I had to go back home to Philadelphia.
Mhm,
And even though it was a national tragedy, it
mhm,
was still a different community in Orlando who just understood like the real gravity and the weight of what
mhm,
happened. And I didn't have to explain as much.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. Yeah, like when people say like, "Oh, why?" Like I'm just gonna, highlight what's going on in the news with that high profile individual who's being sued and accused of horrific crimes. It's so disheartening to see the comment sections, victim blaming, minimizing. I'm like, wow, like, do you really hold that in your heart? Like, if someone were to come up to you and be like, I went through this horrendous life altering experiences, would you ever turn to them and be like, you like 20 years late? Like, you should have been said something. Like, I could not even imagine having that reaction.
And then, or imagine someone that you love, or maybe someone like your sister or
Mhm,
your daughter or
mhm,
somebody. And these are real perspectives that people have, and this is just their real life perspective. So this is why it's important for us to have conversations like this to help people sort of come to consciousness
yeah.
a little bit about the power of their words, number one, but also, just like you said, the power of community, and how that could be pushed for good. But you can also see on social media in the comment sections how that community aspect can also be taken in a very negative turn, and it can create negative communities that are pushing against people who need the support and the love the
Yeah,
most.
absolutely. Like, it doesn't cost anything to be kind and to be compassionate. And so, yeah.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. What is your book about? You're writing an amazing book, and I can't wait to read it. So, what is the book about? Do we have a name yet? What's happening?
We don't have it like we have a working title, but I want to solidify
Okay.
it before I say it.
Okay.
Just But it's all around. So my whole platform is around breaking cycles. And so I'm the cycle breaker coach. And so my book is around breaking cycles. And it is a
I love that.
hybrid between a memoir and a self-help book. And so there's 5 parts. And so, as I mentioned, turning traumas into commas is one of the parts. Some other ones highlight, limiting who has access to you, finding your voice, different things like that. And
Mhm.
leveraging my personal anecdotes to illustrate the importance of, well, why is it important to find your voice? Why is it important to be very selective with your company and set boundaries? And then I have like exercises for people to do. So I'm really excited for that.
This sounds like an amazing resource.
Yeah.
Exercises and the tools. I'm okay. I say this a lot, but I'm all about the actionable tools,
Hmm.
the tips that you can take and really apply to your life, like actionable things. Like I love mindset stuff too, but if there are certain, like you said, exercises, like, okay, well, what am I actually going to do? What action step can I take? Is there a catalyst step that I can take towards where I want to be each day? Or can I do it every couple months? Like, what are those things? But if I had to ask you,
Hmm.
because I usually ask this, oh my gosh, by the end, of the show is if there's any piece of advice, insight, tip, tool, anything that you could share with somebody who is listening and they are struggling to keep that light on. And when I mean by light, you know what I mean.
Hmm. Hmm.
That that spark, that bubbliness about them, that just whatever the essence is of who they are, it's maybe under attack or it may just be, mind tricks and everything that's happening and they're fighting so hard to just see through the clutter. Like what can you tell them?
There's a few things that I would want to tell them. Some things that come to mind are, there is nothing that you have done or said or has been done or said to you that makes you worthy of love any less. You absolutely are worthy of love, respect, and support. Another thing I would say is that you are the expert of your body and your experiences. You were there. You were there when your trauma occurred. I was there when my trauma occurred. And so when people give their opinions and their speculations, they are just that, because they weren't there. It didn't happen to their body. It didn't disrupt their nervous system. It didn't cause them nightmares. And so your voice is the authority. Your opinion, your views reign supreme. And then I would also say, kind of adding to that, is self-validation is a superpower, and we all have the agency to have that superpower. So when anyone tells you, how you should feel or how you should think, you don't need them to tell you anything. You don't need their approval. You don't need them to co-sign. You can stand firmly and confidently in what you feel and what you believe, because you're the expert.
I love that so much. Oh my God. And how can we stay connected with you? How can we follow your journey to make sure we know when the book is coming out? Where can we connect with you?
Yes. So I'm most active on Instagram. So at Cycle Breaker Coach. Same thing on LinkedIn, Priscilla María Gutiérrez, Cycle Breaker Coach. And then my website is priscillamaria.com.
I love the way you say your name, by the way. It's just so smooth and just so fabulous. Well, Priscilla, thank you so much for joining the show. You are, I don't know, every time I talk to you, I just feel like I want to cry
Hmm.
because I don't know. I don't know. You just have such a realness to you, and I feel your heart, and I feel as though you have this bubbly personality and you're very humorous. You do carry a lot,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy that number one, you are writing a book and you're putting your story out there and you're taking your power back in more ways than one and you're helping other people do the same thing.
Mhm.
And I just pray that whatever challenges or whatever distractions that try to come and, deter you from this path, that it won't happen. And that you will perspire to be the best person, the best version that God created you to be. And in Jesus' name, pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
just another air hug, another yay. We're air hugging for those who can't see us on the podcast. But this has been another episode of Healing Her Halo.